And welcome to a conversation on human trafficking in Florida. Our guests for our first panel tonight are David McSwane, who is the Sarasota Herald-Tribune reporter, the reporter for The Stolen Ones, which was a special report on child sex trafficking, as Diane referenced. Scott Carroll is also with the Sarasota Herald-Tribune. He was the project editor and is the city editor for the paper. Elizabeth Fisher is the president of Selah Freedom House in Sarasota. And also with us for our first discussion is Connie Rose, a survivor of child sex trafficking. So welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
And the way we will begin this segment is we're going to actually hear from Heather Kay, who is a woman who was featured in The Stolen Ones. And she talks about her experiences on the street and her effort now to save other young women. So let's take a look at that video clip.
Hi, I'm Heather. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I got into prostitution at age 11. I was forced into prostitution at 11. I've been out now 10 years out of prostitution. We're out riding around showing where the girls are and what they go through on a daily basis. Turn down this street up here to the right. This is a really prostitution area. The traffic was running through here constantly. I'm good. How are you, babe? Right? It's just us girls. Not looking for your pretty self.
No, very flattered. Thank you.
You're so pretty.
Really, really?
I seen you smiling. I was like,
I know. You have
I just want to share.
face.
I just want to share something with you. I used to be out here.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm almost done. My man's taking me away from this shit. I haven't taken a shower in like 2 days.
Oh.
And I haven't changed my clothes in like 2 days. And Keith keeps taking my money that I want to buy new clothes and spending it on crap.
He's been up for a couple of days. Another girl was pregnant. She wants to call. Yeah, well, she's on it. She's like been up for a couple of days. I didn't think about the consequences. I just knew I had to survive. And that's what a lot of these girls, they're doing it to survive. They're not doing it because they want to. In their brain, they're brainwashed thinking they want to, but deep down in their heart, they don't want to be out here selling their bodies. And people who have no idea what these girls go through on a daily basis, well, they think they want to be out there, let them stay out there. You know, these girls don't choose to be out here. Circumstances and life and evilness has them out here.
And we know that national child advocacy groups estimate that 100,000 children per year are exploited. And Heather, I think, puts it well in terms of the reality of what it's like on the streets. And David and Scott, you had the opportunity to see that firsthand. David, you especially, when you were with Heather and she was talking to these girls. She talks about constant traffic. Sarasota's a beautiful town. And it's right there. What did you learn as you went through this experience of telling this story? What surprised you about what was happening on the streets where you lived?
Well, I had spent quite a few months reporting on this issue for a while and had met survivors all over the state, and I finally met Heather through Selah, actually, and was amazed by her immediately. And what she was able to show us was a different side. I mean, it's easy to go out and do a ride-along with police, but we felt that put a barrier between us and our subjects. And she was somebody who had the wherewithal and the experience to take us out there and show us that street-level work. And I was amazed to see how she can approach these women and talk with them with such compassion and understanding. And we found that valuable for the story. And ultimately, you know, we had known sort of academically that this was an issue. We'd seen it. We drive past that stretch of road every day, and she was able to show us a different side of it. So it was illuminating on almost a soul level, being able to see not only Heather talk with them, but Heather understand, you know, where they are. It's not something most of us get to see.
And Scott, your thoughts on that? You had probably seen it from a distance as well until you started telling the story. What was that experience like for you?
Well, it's interesting. I think about it. As an editor, my experience often is akin to that of a reader. I kind of come into it cold. the reporter has some background knowledge, and my first reaction was, can't be. I mean, we see it here on the Strip, but the enormity of the problem and the fact that you're talking about 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds, I didn't believe it at first. And I went through a journey as an editor that I think the readers went through too, and in learning about the issue. And for me, and I think hopefully for readers, it was a matter of changing perception. We look at these women and think of them as criminals and faceless, and we learned that through David's reporting. You know, it goes back to early child abuse often. There are physiological changes in the brain. So there's a whole stream that puts these people where they are, and that was incredibly insightful and powerful to me. And that was our goal, to try and help people understand what's really going on from the ground up.
Mm-hmm. And Elizabeth, Heather at one point was, or she is a survivor, mm-hmm. and now she's an advocate, mm-hmm. and trying to help other women. And the Selah House helps women who have been through that experience. Mm-hmm. Tell us about Selah.
Selah Freedom is a home that is a place for women to finally come when they've come off the streets. We started a couple years ago just sort of learning what was needed and what the truth was, because like you guys, I had moved here from Chicago, and I was thinking, Sarasota, what? And when you start talking to these girls and realizing that they don't have any place to go, like people were starting to understand the issue, but where do they go? And so when they come to our home, they're not only able to get the trauma counseling, we work with a clinical doctor that literally does trauma resetting of their brain. So they're able to come in, and one of the first things that we do with them is have them go through this process with him. It's called rapid resolution, so that he can literally clear that part of their brain and help that reset, so that then when all these other services are coming towards them, like the life skills and the education, many of them don't have an education. If you've been on the street since you're 11, 12 years old, you're still at that 12-year-old level in so many ways, emotionally, developmentally, psychologically, educationally. So we provide all those different life skills they need. Some girls come, and one woman said, I once got, they get arrested so often because they were, like he said, mistaken for being criminals, rather than victimized from childhood by someone they know, sexually abused, and on the streets thinking they were coming into safety, and then re-victimized. So one program that's girl is in there, like, make your bed and be at breakfast at 7, and she's like, make a bed? I don't even know what that means. So like all of the things that we take for granted, we give back to them. So it's basically like restoring a childhood piece by piece, giving them all of the skills, the education, and the fun, returning just some good old outings and, crafts and art and things like that.
Right. And Connie, you're smiling at that.
I'm very lucky. I get to spend a lot of time with girls, or women, actually, and watching them blossom and kind of get reconnected with that inner child. It's because it's really, you had your childhood stolen. So it's about connecting back again to being a little kid, being a little girl, frolicking around with no worry. Yeah. And
it's not a quick process, the recovery process.
No.
Can you tell us a little bit about that, Connie? What that was like for you, or what it has been like for you?
It's a journey. I mean, for myself, it's been over 40 years. And it really depends on who your perpetrator was. Mine was my dad, which is very common. It's 35% of victims that are out there is by someone that they know, and usually by a family member. So that process is, you first have to mourn. You have to mourn the loss of your childhood. You have to mourn the loss of your family, basically. And then once you get past that, and it depends on, like, I was lucky, and I know that sounds odd, but at 19 years old, I was able to leave the life. I was able to get married and literally be able to move on from that point. Doesn't mean that everything stopped. It just meant that I didn't have to have sex with 10, 20, 30 people a day, a night, whatever the circumstance was, out of my own home. And that journey is lifelong. There are so many victims that are addicted to drugs, because that's how their perpetrator holds them. That's that tie on them. And just because you went through court, and just because you're a witness, and just because you appear to be okay, and you're starting to live life, you've got to carry this addiction around with you. You didn't ask to be addicted to drugs. You didn't ask to be addicted to alcohol. You didn't ask for any of those things to happen to have a record. And so thankfully, we're in the state of Florida that has some wonderful laws that need a little bit more backbone and kick to them and support, but they're a start. You know, they're a start. We have safe houses. You know, we have laws so the women and young girls that, and boys that have records can have those records eradicated, expunged. You know, they don't have to worry about carrying that burden on with them anymore. But it's a lifelong journey. It doesn't just stop the minute you're rescued. It doesn't stop the minute you've testified. It doesn't stop. It's a journey.
Go ahead,
I was just
Elizabeth.
going to say, when we started learning about this and deciding we were going to do something for it, we would attend conferences just to learn, national conferences, talk to FBI, national rescue agencies. And what we were told was there's 2 organizations in the country that have been doing this well and have sustainability, and if you want to align and learn from someone. So we did. We got into a relationship with one's in Atlanta, one's in Iowa. So the program, when the girls come to us, we could walk alongside them for 2.5 years. So it's really, really rebuilding and fully walking them back into community.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like you have all of the resources you need?
Well, we have an amazing start, well beyond what we could have ever thought we had. And we have a matching gift right now of $250,000, and that will help with housing a lot. We're only $85,000 away from completing that. So that is we already have the first home, and that will help us to increase and add beds, because now that it's out there and law enforcement's learning how to identify it, the calls that you get for the girls needing beds is quite high.
Mm-hmm. And David, let me ask you this. As you went through this process and looked into the resources that were available, funding, maybe what wasn't available, were there any surprises for you in terms of, oh, this is how this works?
Well, I'm not surprised by the lack of resources because I've covered government. But well, what I found was that was sort of the complaint across the board. You know, the FBI agent Greg Christopher in Tampa, who's fantastic, says, you know, I'm sweeping up these girls and I got nowhere to put them. It's no wonder that we have to Baker Act them. We got to put them in jail sometimes. We don't want to do that, but we have to. And you start to realize that's the narrative across the state with local law enforcement. Those local law enforcement agencies that recognize this is an issue. There are some that don't. You know, that's throughout the country. And those safe houses that do exist are, you know, primarily I think for adult women, and maybe Elizabeth could tell you more, but the way the law is written doesn't really encourage that right now. And the funding mechanism that is in place isn't quite working yet. So if you know, as a reporter, you approach it as a system and try to understand its weaknesses, you really, you know, you see that it's from all angles, and you know, what is that root cause? It's a lack of data and understanding. It's a lack of perspective. People aren't looking for the problem. So we decided to focus more on that than we probably would with another story where you have established systems and funding and goals and all of that.
Mm-hmm. And if I may just add something, part of the issue too is how this is looked at. Still, a lot of law enforcement consider it, even if it's a minor crime. And so why Heather was so relevant in my mind anyways was she got at the issue of choice, which was one of the things that we really tried to accomplish in this story, was show that what she said was she had been abused as a child by a family member repeatedly. And then when she was 11, in order to get food she hadn't eaten, she agreed, or she had sex with somebody else that her father selected. She never had a choice. And this is what we came across repeatedly, is that there's still an assumption, and that's part of the reason that the resources aren't as free-flowing as they should be, is that this is a choice that people make, a poor life choice. And I'm convinced, and I think we show to a large extent that that's simply not true, that you have, it's survival, and these are decisions that are understandable if you consider the circumstances these people are in.
And if you unpack that concept of choice, you're then asking law enforcement that has for decades treated a certain group of people as criminals, now as victims, and that is not easily done, especially when you've got a bifurcated state and federal, and it really is quite a task.
In fact, and when we talk about choice and we talk about survival, we have a lot of victims running around, walking around right next to you. They could even be sitting in this room for all we know. They don't realize they're a victim because of survival sex. That's what it's called. Because since the number is so large of our children that are being sexually abused, usually at home, unfortunately, what they're doing is they're running away. Because they're saying, okay, this is happening to me at home. This is my safe place, my house. And I can't live here anymore. I can't put my head down at night. So I'm going to run away. And whatever happens to me on the street is going to happen to me, but it's got to be better than this. So then what happens is law enforcement sees them, and they say, oh, she's a chronic runaway. You know, we pick her up all the time, and she just runs again. Forget about her. Oh, and then we found out that she was having sex with a bunch of people, so just put her over here. We're not going to deal with it. And so it's law enforcement has to have a mind change and a mindset, but every single person in this audience and anyone that's going to listen to this has to have a different mindset and stop looking at kids as throwaways and, oh, you're just dirt, scum, because you chose to run away.
Yeah. That's why I think their piece was brilliant, because it re-educated. It helped people stop and pause and re-examine the issue. It's beautiful.
And Elizabeth, that mindset has to go beyond the process itself for rescuing these girls. It also goes to the assimilation process, which we have a couple of minutes left for this segment, and I wanted to ask you about that specifically. Society might not welcome back these young women even when they're ready to say, I'm ready to find a new life.
Well, what's interesting is since we started, back when we started this journey, there was one guy in our area that had a passion for this population who worked at Goodwill, and he was like, I can get any felon a job. And then since then, I mean, I applaud the state. We passed a law to expunge their records, and every 3 prostitution arrests equals a felony. So some of these girls would come into our care with 20 felonies all over the place. But now that those records can be vacated, someone's not going to as easily be able to look at their past and identify them. So, you know, just a blanket statement over them. And so I do think, especially with, you know, what's happening with pieces like this and with education, like law enforcement in our area has been so open to being educated. People, once they realize, oh, there's a backstory. Oh, I thought that was just a prostitute. When they're realizing this was a child that was abused their whole lives, like compassion is coming. And when compassion comes, someone is no longer labeled. And I think it's a whole different point then of someone coming back into like the education world or the job force. They're going to be looked at differently. I'm believing that they'll be received how Connie's received. She walks in a room and she's applauded.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the good news and maybe the easy part of the story compared to some of the legal challenges, which we'll be talking about next. Thank you for this part of the conversation.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.